Okay.
All right. We ready, Doug?
We are broadcasting live. We're ready.
All right. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. And I call our meeting to order and declare that we have a quorum. And I will look for the adoption of the agenda.
Are all 7 board members here?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3,
Yes.
4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah.
So moved.
Like it's about ready to
Second.
fall.
I have a motion and a second. I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Garden,
Yes.
Dr. Albin,
Yes.
Ms. Greco,
Yes.
Ms. Glover Jones,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. Moving on to 1.04, we have our Pledge of Allegiance. Is there any of our Iveland friends that would like to start us by leading the Pledge of Allegiance? Oh, yes. Moving on to 1.04, we have, oh, there I am back at myself. All right, so if I could ask everybody to please stand, and we will start our Pledge of Allegiance. Let's see, the Logan family, can you start us off with the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Ready? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty
and justice for all.
All right.
All right. Sorry, I'm unstable there. My internet is unstable. See, everybody has issues. All right, moving on to 1.05 for our School of the Month. Ms. Conley, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you all for having us here this evening to share with you a little bit about how the beginning of our school year has started. As all of you know, this has really been a year unlike any other for us. Most of our time has been kind of consumed with preparing for multiple scenarios of how we might open up the school. So really, when I turned this presentation into board docs, we had only had 3 days of school under our belt at that moment in time. And so really thought about sharing with you this evening, kind of fleshing out what it looks like in a school to plan for all the decisions that I know you guys have been acutely aware of that were made over the summer in regards to bringing students either back to school or being in a virtual environment. So even though this work really started back in the spring, we have shifted an entire culture of really not just Iveland or Ritenour, but education. Just the culture of what we do on a day-to-day basis looks very, very different. Mr. Bray, do you mind going on to the, thank you very much. So like I said, really our culture is very different. So I have some pictures up here to start us off that represent some of our summer. The first picture is the Zoom meeting that just represents how culturally we're not just planning something different for instruction, we're planning how we do celebrations, we're replanning how we just go about our business of the day. The other 2 pictures represent kind of our commitment to being prepared, whether we were in a hybrid learning situation or a virtual situation. So the one picture at the top right represents is our hallway and how we have designed it to help teach students about social distancing. The dots are 6 feet apart and traffic patterns and how we're going to stay kind of separate from one another. So we prepared for that scenario. But we also, of course, are prepared for the virtual scenario, and that's what the technology at the bottom represents, because that has really consumed everything that we do right now is the technology. So Mr. Bray, will you flip to the second one? So the first thing we had to do is make sure everybody was ready. And by ready, we mean our staff is ready, that our families were ready, and that our students were ready. So traditionally, when we begin our school year with our staff, we're doing things like team building and motivating staff and going through logistical information. And we did do all of those things, but we did it through Zoom. And in that process, really modeled for teachers how they can use Zoom as an instructional tool. So when we were participating in our meetings, we used things such as the breakout rooms and chat and screen sharing functions, and just kind of practice norms such as muting and unmuting and the different procedures and routines that you would need to anticipate as having Zoom a part of your daily life. And then, of course, the picture at the top right is actually our staff doing some team building activities. They were doing a scavenger hunt of things that were important to them in their room. They talked about why they were important to them. See a lot of phones in that picture. But we also did our trainings through Zoom as well. So staff was trained on Seesaw and Google Classroom and Flipgrid and screencasting and a myriad of other apps that they might encounter this year. And some of that training was done at the building level, but most of it was really done at the district level. And then the last piece, staff really think about setting up their rooms for the beginning of the year. And that took on a different look this year as well. When the teachers came in, the facilities department and the administrative staff had already gone through and basically set up the furniture for staff to ensure that the desks were socially distanced, not just the student's desk, but the teacher's desk, and there was room to accommodate that social distancing in the classroom. So teachers had to be really creative about how they set up their individual learning space. They needed to think about the technology and how they were going to access inputs for webcams and Promethean boards and the document cameras. Then they had to think about what other tools that they normally use. So a lot of staff thought about, well, where do I position my easel so that it's viewed, can be viewed by the students and isn't in the way. And then they, of course, wanted to make it look just welcoming and inviting for students still. So there was a lot of thought that teachers put into just their individual teaching space that they set up for staff or for their students. So if you can flip, thank you. So then next we wanted to make sure that our families are ready, because this is a unique and new experience for our families as well. So we had to make sure they were ready with the materials, but ready to access the materials as well. So the top right picture is the map that families were sent that shows them all the different stations that they would go through as a part of our distribution process. So you can see there were 7 different spots because there was a lot of detail that went into planning for that. We had to not just give them the materials, but make sure they had signed off on technology agreements and insurance, and we wanted to give them an opportunity to at least see their teacher. So we went through that whole process of distribution, which lasted 4 formal days, but I will say it's really still occurring. We're getting new students still, and families that materials just weren't the right ones in terms of the Chromebook wasn't working or something like that. So we're still really participating in that process, but you can see from the one picture with the cars that was just a visual of what that distribution process looked like. But I think even more importantly, we needed to make sure that our families knew how to get on the technology. So I have a couple links that I shared there. The Wednesday before school started, every family received an email that was specific to their class. And in that email was a presentation by their teacher. They all looked a little bit differently, so I shared a couple of them here with you that really walked parents through what to expect and how to log on. So I'll let Miss Brandt talk for a moment.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Brandt, and I'm so excited to be your 4th grade teacher this year. Click the buttons over here to learn more about me and our class this year, and click the house down here just to return to this page. See you on Monday.
So in the rest of Miss Brandt's presentation, she shared a little bit about herself. She had a page where she shared the key resources that they would be using, and that page right there, if you can hold on, Mr. Bray, for a second. I won't share them with you right now, but each of those you could access so that the parents knew how to click on each of those buttons. And then if you can keep going for a minute, she talked about the schedules and how to contact her. But then another component we had to be really careful with this year as well was make sure that all of our families could access the information. So Ms. Brandt then has all the information in Spanish as well after that. So we'll stop there for just a moment. Now, if you can go to Ms. Vreeland's. This is just another example of one of our primary teachers. And I'm going to have you go to the page where she tours her Google Classroom. Right there, if you don't mind clicking that link.
Hi, second grade and families. This is Mrs. Vreeland. I'm here today to tour you around our Google Classroom. So the way to get to Google Classroom is from your Gmail account with Ritenour School District. You're going to click on the array of dots, or the waffle we like to call it. So you'll click on there, go to the classroom icon. It's going to bring you to this Google Classroom homepage, and you'll notice I have a lot of classrooms that yours might look a little bit different. So I'm going to click on Mrs. Vreeland's second grade. You'll notice we have a class code for this page. And then we have these tabs at the top for stream, classwork, people, and grades. The grades section you're not going to have to worry about right now. So if I scroll down on my screen.
So Ms. Breland just continues on. That just kind of gave you a sample, and you can go back and look later if you like, but gave you a sample of some of the things that the teachers were doing to help prepare the families. So that email was sent out to all families the Wednesday before school started. And then on that Thursday, we did a live session where students could click in and see their teachers on Zoom, make sure that they could get connected, make sure they went to the right spot and the technology was working, say hi to their teacher and meet them if they didn't get to see them during distribution, where they could just ask any questions that they had. I know that our families did a great job of preparing, because that Thursday and Friday and even through email over the weekend, we were getting communication from parents who just wanted to make sure everything was ready and set to go Monday morning. So I really compliment our families who did a great job of making sure that they were prepared for the first day of school. And then, of course, we wanted to make sure that our students were ready. So I did have the opportunity to sit down and interview a few of our students, and we won't play all of these clips tonight, but they'll be there for you to see. And two of our families are with us tonight. So I was able to sit down with Kalia and Evelyn and Casey and talk to them a little bit about how their families prepared for distance learning, how they felt about it, and kind of what they did the first few days. So I'm going to let Kalia tell us about how her family prepared. If we can click on Kalia's response.
So we got a table, and then we got school supplies and art supplies and books.
Yeah. I think Kalia's family was similar to a lot of other families that I talked about, that they were really conscientious about making sure they had a good space to learn from, and then they had the materials that they needed. I'm going to let Casey talk for a moment about what he felt about distance learning. So if we can click on Casey. So how are you feeling about virtual learning?
I like it.
You like it? What are some of the best parts?
When we get to do like specials and library and get to do IXL.
So you can see, I think Casey just really liked the routines and the structure of things that he's used to. A lot of the other kids, both Kalia and Evelyn and some of the other kids I've talked to, said that they just really were glad to see their friends and really glad to see their teachers. And then Evelyn had a really interesting response to what they did the first few days of school. We're not going to play all of it. We'll play about a minute of it. Post-it notes. Very cool.
And there's yesterday's. And
Is that Jamboard?
Mm-hmm.
All right. It looks like you're taking kind of notes of what you're supposed to do.
What I did, and then there's the first page.
Oh, well, that was a really smart idea. Did your teacher tell you to do that, or you just knew how to do that?
No, she introduced us to the website.
Mm-hmm.
And then she didn't tell us to do anything on it. So I decided to make a slide of that, and then I made another one. It's
Okay.
It's how to get clever.
So Evelyn essentially made icons of all the different spots she has to go to on her Jamboard so that she was ready. And she actually shared with me yesterday the entirety of her Jamboard, and she has been keeping a new slide every single day that keeps her notes of everything that she's supposed to know and do. So it's really interesting. A lot of kids talked about, of course, doing get to know you activities and learning kind of routines and procedures. But Evelyn kind of developed her own procedures. So that was really something that I wanted to share. So on August 31st, we were off and ready to go. These are pictures from the very first day of school. Like we talked about before, had a few technical issues with everybody getting on Monday, but I would say by Wednesday afternoon, we were down to the single digits of families that we weren't able to log on or at least see throughout the first few days of school. The top left corner there is Miss Jones, who's actually doing a long-term sub position for us right now. And you can see she's kind of using her dual screens of her Promethean board and her computer. So she's got her kids on one screen and the content on the other screen. The middle picture there is students in a breakout room doing a get to know you activity of this or that. So they got to choose and discuss which of the pictures they connect it with or would choose. We've got Mrs. Stein in the top right corner doing a brain break activity with her class. She was up and dancing with them. I wish I had the video of it, but there's a snapshot. And then down at the bottom is Miss Meyer, who was her first morning with her kindergartners, our youngest of learners in the elementary setting, just greeting them for the first time. So our motto at Iveland is together we can and together we will. We say it every single day. It's something we talk about continuously. And you know, I think the summer, my staff has really proved that they will do whatever they can to make sure that all of our students will learn. And I think that no matter what the future holds for us, we're going to have a really fantastic year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Great.
So Amanda, with the technology, you know, what are some common questions that you see coming your way around technology, knowing it's so critical when we're fully virtual?
I would say in the office, we're really getting two types of questions right now. It's families who just, for some reason or the other, I don't know if it's, I would say sometimes it's user error and sometimes it's the actual device, but just making sure they have the access to the technology that's going to get them on. They're having trouble logging on. They're having trouble, you know, getting the camera to work, those kind of things. I will say Aristotle's kind of been a game changer for us, because oftentimes we're trying to help families who are having some difficulty, and it's hard because you don't see the same thing to kind of coach them through it. But with Aristotle, we've been able to do that, and that has decreased the kind of the barriers and obstacles that we've had with technology. So that has been a game changer for us in this last week. But mostly it's just getting on, whether that's, like I said, something with the machine or user error of not knowing how to get to a place.
Have you seen a number of families come to you to request hotspots in the last week and a half or so?
Yes, definitely have had that. We've given out a good number of hotspots and still have a waiting list of students who want to be on the hotspots. We had some families who requested one device during our distribution, but we've had other families that once they got on and realized, you know, that their internet might not be as adequate as they thought, have come back around and requested it as well. So yes, hotspots have definitely been a need for our building.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for Kalia. Hi, Kalia. How are you?
Good.
Good. So how comfortable do you feel now that you've had a little over a week and a half now working with the system? How do you feel? Good? So I have to ask, what is your favorite subject to do?
Want to tell them about the penguins you've been watching?
The penguins.
The
Yeah,
penguins?
We have watched penguins.
Yeah, for science class, right?
Oh, fun.
So Monterey Bay and San Diego, right? And where else? The Georgia Aquarium. They've been live camming in to observe and take notes on the penguins, and she's been talking about that a lot. So
Wonderful. Well, thanks for sharing, Kalia. And what about Evelyn? Evelyn, how are you doing now that we've been into it? For a week and a half, do you feel comfortable?
She does.
Yeah. And what's your favorite subject this year?
Writing and reading.
Writing and reading. And what?
Math.
And math. Do you feel like it's going good having the math online?
Yeah.
I was worried about math. That's a hard class, so I was always worried about that. I'm glad that's going good. Well, thank you for coming and talking to us. Does any other board members have any other questions? All right. Ms. Connolly, thank you so much for presenting that information to us. It's good to see the hard work is going in by the teachers and the staff and paying off there.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. And thank you, Kalia and Mrs. Logan. And thank you, Evelyn and Mrs. Dury, for joining us.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Okay, so we will go ahead and move on to 1.06, where we have report of closed session. And I'd like to report that the Board of Education met in closed session on August 13th and 15th, 2020 for the purpose of discussion of personnel agenda items. Moving on to 1.07, public comments. I have 2 letters that were sent in, and I will start with the first letter from Ms. Bray. Dear Ritenour Board of Education, I wanted to say thank you for your continued support of teachers and students. These are unprecedented times, and you have listened to teachers and the community and have made thoughtful and considerate decisions. I know you are under immense pressure from some community members and politicians to open the brick and mortar buildings. While I am eager to see my students' faces and teach them in person, I want to do it safely. I am writing to you today from a parent's perspective. 2 of my children are currently in school full-time. They are in a small school with only about 16 in a class. We were given no online option, so we sent them back trusting the many safety precautions our school has put in place. I can tell you that it is not normal school at all. My kids, who usually love school, have come home crying more days than not. They don't get to leave their desks when they are in the classroom. Each desk has plexiglass walls to protect the children. They feel isolated. They wear their mask all day. They leave the classroom only for lunch, with 2 kids at a table, and recess, only 1 class per grade level at a time. While I know these are necessary safety precautions, my kids are miserable. They don't get to talk to their friends and never see friends in a different class. At lunch, my daughter sits by herself many days because the other child assigned to her table is often absent. Their teachers can't get close to help them learn. It is not ideal to say the least. At least 3 teachers that I am aware of at my children's school have already been absent to be tested for COVID. My 2 kids have had 4 different subs in the first 2 weeks of school. The art teacher needed to cancel art for 2 days to sub. We were notified that my daughter's homeroom teacher was exposed to a positive case and was getting tested. She had 2 different subs in the last week. Then we received a follow-up letter saying a member of the school community tested positive. We are not able to know if it is my daughter's homeroom teacher, who also teaches math to all 4th and 5th graders, or a different community member. The school has reassured us through a phone call to the principal that the positive person was not in the building during a contagious period. As a parent, this has been unbelievably stressful, and school has been in session for 12 days. I know there is a great push to get kids in the classroom. I ask that if at all possible, we take our time and don't rush into things. We are just getting up and running with virtual school. Teachers have spent so much time teaching students and families to use the technology. We are just beginning to start teaching the curriculum. Our students and families haven't really experienced the virtual curriculum yet. Why not just give it some time and let everyone catch our breath? Let other districts go back and see how things go. I'm telling you from a parent who is in the middle of kids being back, it's not easy. Maybe we can give it a little more time and learn from schools who are going back to in-person learning quickly. Let's continue the Ritenour tradition of doing things right and doing what is best for kids and families. Thanks again for all your service and thoughtful decision making. I truly appreciate all you do for Ritenour. Stacy Bray from Wyland Elementary. The next letter that we have, I'll read that one. Dear Ritenour School Board members, I am again writing to express my concern about the lack of in-person education in our district. I have written before about the well-documented educational, social, and emotional impacts of keeping children isolated with full virtual learning. We are only in the second week of school, and as I write this, my son is crying in his room because he has questions about a test. My desire is to go and help him, but I have reframed since it is a test. I am not his teacher and do not know what level of intervention is acceptable. My son has never had these kinds of emotional breakdowns at school. I have noticed that since he has been online, he is very distracted. He is able to do his learning in a quiet room, but he comes out often to talk. I often find him running around in his room or taking a break when it's not break time. I believe the lack of physical connection has already taken a toll on his ability to concentrate and learn. I have never had any of these difficulties mentioned about my son by any of his teachers in previous years. We are only in the second week, but I am worried about the impact virtual learning will have on a more long-term basis. It frustrates me that the concerns and desires of the vast majority of the parents in our district have been ignored. Our children have been put in a near impossible situation because of a virus that has little to no impact on children and those who are otherwise healthy. A plan needs to be put in place to get our children back in the classroom as soon as possible before our kids suffer any further. Sincerely, Sarah Phillips Morgan. And those are the only two that I have for this evening. Thank you. Moving on to our reports. 2.01. I'd like to take a moment at our meeting tonight to recognize all of our Ritenour staff members who helped us to a successful start to the school year. The past few months have been some of the most challenging times in the history of our district and our nation. The COVID-19 pandemic has created obstacles in education not seen for generations. Our amazing staff members have proven they are up to the task. Our staff worked tirelessly all summer to prepare for the new school year. They have also found new ways to deliver meals and distribute technology to our families. Our teachers took part in hours of professional development connected to virtual learning. On top of that, staff have worked to ensure everyone is as safe as possible as we successfully kicked off our 153rd school year. Our administrators have provided leadership and guidance in this time of uncertainty and coordinated all the essential functions that keep our students learning and our district running smoothly. Thank you for a strong start to our 2020-2021 school year, and we look forward to all the amazing things our students are going to learn and accomplish throughout this school year. Thank you, and that concludes my report. I'll be moving on to 2.02 with Dr. Kilbride.
Thank you, Ms. Flonis, and I echo your sentiments about the Ritenour staff. Done an absolutely fabulous job under very difficult conditions. And I do want to share again, board members, that this afternoon, the Ritenour Middle School staff organized a caravan to recognize the Missouri Middle School Counselor of the Year, Mr. Matt Berry. So there was a caravan that went past Ritenour Middle School to recognize Matt and have a little surprise for him in front of the school. A very well-deserved honor. And board members, if you remember, in the last 3 years now, that's the second Ritenour educator who's been recognized with a state level position. Beth Davey, a couple of years ago, was the Missouri Teacher of the Year, and now Matt Berry, the Missouri Middle School Counselor of the Year. In my superintendent's report, I'm happy to announce that the Hall of Fame committee has selected the Hall of Fame class of 2020, and there's 4 inductees. The first inductee is Dr. Arlene Ackerman. Dr. Ackerman was part of the class of 1963, and this honor will be bestowed posthumously. Dr. Ackerman is a nationally recognized educator who served in some of the largest public school systems in the country. She served as the superintendent of the Washington, D.C., or the District of Columbia Public Schools. She served as the superintendent of the San Francisco Unified School District. She also had a stint as the superintendent of the Philadelphia Public Schools. Dr. Ackerman, during her tenure in San Francisco Unified, was recognized as the National Superintendent of the Year. So a very decorated educator. Dr. Ackerman passed away in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 2013 at the age of 66. So a very deserving candidate, and we look forward to recognize her. Unfortunately, it'll be posthumously. We'll recognize her with her family when we're able to be together. The next inductee of the class of 2020 into the Ritenour Hall of Fame is Dr. Bobby Gines. Dr. Gines is a member of the class of 1964. He's another educator, an award-winning educator who worked as an administrator in St. Louis Public, in the Riverview Gardens School District, and as well as 3 districts in the Kansas City area. So congratulations to Dr. Gines. We also recognize Jim Marshall, who was a class of 1976 graduate from Ritenour High. He's a renowned history and PE teacher and also coach who led Jeff City High School to 9 state championships in track and field, as well as cross country. Mr. Marshall is a member of the Missouri Sports Hall of Fame, and he is currently the head coach at William Woods University in Fulton, Missouri. The final inductee into the Hall of Fame class is Mr. Mervell Sellers, class of 1980, a nationally known author who writes paranormal suspense novels. The Hall of Fame committee decided to cancel the in-person induction ceremony in keeping with the district return to learning plan. We will, however, be making the official announcement on September 18th at 5 p.m. So we'll make a virtual announcement that'll get pushed out through social media to the entire community. The inductees are going to be invited to the ceremony that'll be held next fall. So we'll be recognizing the class of 2020 and 2021 together next fall in person. So congratulations. Also, board members, I'd like to congratulate you. Being one of 3 St. Louis County Boards of Education for receiving the Missouri School Board's Governance Team Award. 3 in St. Louis County and a total of 26 school boards from across the state, from the more than 520 school districts in the state of Missouri. The Ritenour School District Board earned this award for their outstanding commitment to ongoing professional growth, to regional and statewide leadership, and to active participation in legislative matters at the state level. So due to COVID, the board will be recognized virtually during the MSBA conference. The conference was to be held in Kansas City a little later this month. It's going to be all virtual now, and you will be recognized virtually at the MSBA virtual conference. Board members, congratulations to you. Thank you for your commitment to this community and the students of the Ritenour School District, and it's an honor to serve with you.
Hey, Chris.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Chris.
Yes.
Dr. Ackerman's maiden name is Randall, correct? She's from the Randall family. They had several students.
I believe so. Yep.
Archie was the minister, preacher over at the church in Breckenridge Hills. So some of you may know the family, even though you don't recognize Dr. Arlene Ackerman's name. Prominent African-American family.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you. And that concludes my report.
Not as quick to unmute. Sorry, I apologize. Moving on to 2.03, we have our MSBA NSBA report with Dr. Thomas.
All right. Doug, can we roll that film?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of September. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the opening of a school year like no other. The continuing COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in a wide range of school reopening plans in Missouri. Some students are returning to full-time in-person classes, but with new procedures in place, including masks, frequent hand washing, and physical distancing. Some are returning part-time in school buildings and part-time learning remotely, while other school districts are beginning the year with virtual instruction only. And those plans may change quickly, depending on how the coronavirus either spreads or is contained this fall. MSBA, the Missouri Hospital Association, and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education have released a new poster reminding students that they have a role to play to defend against the coronavirus at their schools and in their communities. The Be a Hero and Mask Up posters are being provided to elementary and middle schools throughout the state. The posters are an effort to remind students they can be superheroes by using hand sanitizer, keeping proper distance between themselves and teachers, and wearing their masks in the fight to keep their community safe. The pandemic and the recent focus on social and racial justice have put the issue of educational equity in the spotlight. It's not a new issue for MSBA and our public schools, but it is one that's receiving greater attention. MSBA's Senior Director for Equity and Board Development, Janet Tilley, says school boards have a responsibility to ensure success for all students.
And a fiduciary has the responsibility of loyalty and trust and of care of the children within their district. And that means all children. And so as a fiduciary, you have to know what are the needs of our kids and how do we address all of those needs.
Tilley adds, equity is not just a matter of opportunity, but also must include access to that opportunity.
You have to dig a little bit deeper and to start to look at what are the processes or the reasons why those are the children who are in poverty. And you can't ignore it. We have to acknowledge the fact that a lot of these children are facing these barriers because of systemic processes that were put in place by the adults around them. And so we have to then know what those barriers are and know how to navigate and provide the access that these kids need.
MSBA has several initiatives underway to address the issue of equity, including 2 new board workshops, a book study available to board members, and the development of a toolkit designed to assist boards in examining their policies and practices through an equity lens. Contact MSBA's Board Development Department for more details on those initiatives. As many school buildings reopen, it's important that educators are aware of their responsibility to report cases of child abuse and neglect. A new video produced by the Department of Social Services, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and MSBA is designed to heighten the importance of reporting child abuse and neglect as the new school year begins. The director of the Children's Division, David Wood, says an online reporting option allows mandated reporters to quickly share troubling information with the appropriate personnel.
Due to the recent pandemic and schools switching to distance learning, there has been a decrease in the number of hotline calls reporting child abuse and neglect. I believe there will also be a large increase in the calls as students return to school, so we need to be prepared. The first step in helping abused or neglected children is learning to recognize the signs of child abuse and neglect. The presence of a single sign does not prove child abuse is occurring in a family, but a closer look at the situation may be warranted when these signs appear repeatedly or in combination.
The Department of Social Services urges every Missourian to be attentive to the safety and well-being of children during COVID-19. If you suspect child abuse or neglect, you can call the toll-free hotline at 1-800-392-3738. The hotline is answered 24 hours a day, every day, year-round. MSBA is pleased to announce Dr. Robert R. Redfield, the director of the Centers for Disease Control, will be with us live as a speaker during the first general session of the 2020 MSBA Annual Conference on Friday, September 25th. He will discuss how COVID-19 is impacting our students and schools and what the future looks like. The 2020 Annual Conference will be held virtually this year and will include traditional pre-conference sessions, general sessions, and other conference events. 30 sessions will be presented during the virtual conference on September 24th through the 26th. Additionally, a series of online sessions will be offered weekly to registered conference participants beginning October 6th. Those registered for the annual conference will have access to all content until June 30th of 2021. Check the MSBA website for registration information and a schedule of conference sessions. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
I know everybody's getting all kinds of email, getting invitations to different virtual training and things like that. I would look at the MSBA's website and the NSBA's website for that information. It might be free. We might not have to pay for the virtual training. But if not, if that's something that's of interest to you, I fully encourage the board members to look at that so that you're staying up with what the latest and greatest is from both the Missouri School Board Association and the National School Board Association. You get a weekly email that updates you on everything locally and nationally. So keep yourself informed. And that's the end of my report.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to 2.04, we have our special school district report from Dr. Alvin.
Good evening. How are you all doing?
Good, thank you.
Tell you what, I have been really missing my special school district opportunities going out into the actual buildings once a month. So it was really nice to be a part of the town hall meeting that they special school district had. And what I think is so important, especially about this, because I did make a summary attached to my report is the actual town hall report that they had actually gone through. And what I really appreciated about this was seeing the proactive approach that special school district was going through in terms of how to help our children that have IEPs or special needs within our classrooms K through 12. So I really appreciate, I know it's not necessarily the most ideal situation, but they are really working arduously to be able to rise to the occasion, to the challenges that all of our kids are facing. Some of it is the language. You can see right here, they talk about the hybrid approach. That's kind of what's going on in terms of how and what's happening with us in Ritenour and the explanation of what phase 1 and phase 2 is and phase 3. Because right now we're looking really at phase 3 and hopefully one day getting back to a hybridized model. But on my report, I had written about what's known as the distance learning plans. First, it started out with the early childhood special education, because there's acronyms everywhere all over the place. So instead of the DLP is the distance learning plan that is written in to describe how surfaces will be applied with IEPs and outlining accommodations. So it is happening. I think it's very challenging because it's such a virtual template as opposed to actually being in an actual classroom. And if you move to the next slide, it talks about the distance learning plans. They are the lessons, the activities based upon the IEP, and to be able to communicate the needs of the students and how they need to be addressed. with both blended and virtual learning. To me, it was just a very educational process to see. To me, that is a very basic definition of what's going on, but I think there's so much more work behind those words that have to be going on between the educator and the special school district educator, as well as when you're talking about the special school district like D. Burns and how they're all incorporating all this. Go ahead and move to the next slide. Wellness teams. I think this is really interesting too. And I think this is the other component because obviously this is very stressful and it's stressful for everyone involved. And so having these wellness teams organized that support the social and emotional needs of students, and each building has a wellness team in order to support students, families, and staff. And the teams are led by professional counselors, SSD, RSD social workers, SSD school psychologists, and RSD school nurses. So I think that's so important because I think we're really going to have to utilize those throughout the school year and when we get back into either a hybrid or full. Next slide. The focus of the wellness teams are transitional activities, academic support, grief support, instructional and technological support, and refer to town. There's more on the town hall meeting. What's neat about this is to see there has been a lot of thought that has gone into this. Granted, you can say, yes, it's nice that it's written there, but to actually make it happen is going to be so much more of an arduous task. But to me, at the very beginning of the school year, to see that those thoughts have been kind of processed is just absolutely so important. Go ahead and move to the next slide. What can parents expect? Regular school day related services will be provided virtually. Parents will receive distance learning plan, hopefully bi-weekly. I can only imagine how much work that goes into producing that. When safe to resume class in person, special education services will also be provided in person. So to me, I think that this was a wonderful opportunity to really have and see educators, SSD, families, parents discussing very important ideas that need to be covered because they are kids that are going to be having probably one of the harder struggles not being in an actual real classroom setting. So that pretty much concludes my report. If you have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and look at both my PowerPoint presentation and the town hall meeting. And I sure do hope, and I don't know, Dr. Kilbride, if they're planning on having another one of these, because I think that it was extremely helpful, not only for me, but to be able to touch base with everybody to see what, how hard everybody's been working so that we can hopefully provide the best education for the kiddos, especially those with IEPs and special needs.
Absolutely.
So
Thank
Dr.
you.
Albin, I just have a quick question for you. If people are having any questions or concerns about IEP or what their plans are and everything, they should be reaching out to that wellness team for each of their schools?
Their coordinator, I think, would be the best person so that they can make sure to match it up with who they need to be talking to.
Okay.
Yeah, best contact would be their child's case manager, and they would know who that person is through the IEP process.
Great. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from anybody?
Thank you, Stacy.
Oh, you're welcome. I can't wait to get more info about it because I miss those kids.
All right. Moving on to our business items, we'll move on to our 3.01, which is our SRO agreement. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Kilbride.
Thank you, Ms. Lones. So board members, we're bringing this item to you for a recommendation for approval of the agreement with the St. Anne Police Department regarding SRO services. Board members, this has been a part of our conversation in work session around the revised agreement with our SROs. We're starting with the St. Anne Police Department, and then pending approval with the St. Anne agreement, we'd be moving towards St. John and the Breckenridge Hills as well, as those are the two other police departments that provide school resource officers in our schools. We've had a good bit of conversation around the agreements, and attached in board docs are the two different agreements that have been discussed. The one difference between agreement number one that is attached is the language in number 9 around prone restraint. That language is included. So SRO agreement number 1 includes the language that as a part of the agreement, the use of any prone restraint, and we partnered with the St. Anne Police Department to describe what that is. Prone restraint would be prohibited in Ritenour schools. In agreement number 2, the language is identical. The only difference is showed on the screen in number 9. That language around prone restraint is not a part of the agreement and thus would not be prohibited in Ritenour buildings. As a part of our planning for action plan, we are working through a process to revise all restraint policies. And we're starting with this document here. I know there's been a lot of conversation amongst the board around this specific language, and just wanted to open it up for board members for dialogue and then a recommendation around either adopting SRO agreement number 1 or SRO agreement number 2.
So does anybody have any questions or statements they would like to make on either one?
Are we to decide between the two?
Yes.
Decide between the two, and the difference between the two, it was pointed out. It's the prone restraint language.
I know for myself personally, the thing that a couple things that keep resonating with me is at the end of the day, I think that who we have in place currently in our school district, there are good relationships there. They are intentional in regards to how they practice. So my concern is not so much about what current practices are in regards to that. My concern is about putting something of this nature in place for future practices. And then that will be the precedent across the board for the district as it pertains to not limiting the language for prone restraints. I get it at the end of the day that maybe what's necessary in like the worst case scenario situations, but I do have concerns with not prohibiting that prone restraints. And I think I've heard I heard Orlando say before, as far as, what does that look like future wise? We've done a great job in having relationships established with who we have currently. I think we've heard from some of our students that there are relationships there, but I am concerned about what precedent does that set moving forward, not just with this agreement, but with agreements throughout the district.
So are you saying you're for number 1 or number 2, Lisa?
That will be 1, because that's the one that prohibits the prone restraint, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
So many times. I keep getting them mixed up.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
Thank you, Ruth.
I think I feel like we need to not prohibit it, just to be on the safe side. Because I think that's what a police officer is trained to do. And I think, like you're saying, we have great relationships with our SROs right now, especially the St. Anne ones. And I think they understand where we're coming from. I understand that you're saying, well, we get somebody new in there, may not be as good, but I feel like that's kind of on us, not on them, because they are trained in this. And I believe that from the discussions we've had starting back in, I think it was July, that there's a good understanding as to just how we feel as a board and a district about that. But I think we need to leave it in just because it's part of what they're trained to do.
leave it in or out, Ruth?
I'm saying number 2.
Okay,
That's easier.
thank you.
It's
It is
Sorry.
confusing.
Yes, it is.
it's easy to say, that we want to, in a way, we vote for number 1. We want to tie the hands of the police officers to do their job. They are highly trained. These guys are trained and they want to be in our schools. And I would hate to tie their arm behind their back and say, no, you can't do something when their training is saying, this is what I have to do. I don't want them second guessing themselves. I don't want them then putting themselves or others in harm's way. And I think we need to give them all the tools they can to do their job and take care of the situation at hand. So I would be in favor of giving them those tools and not prohibiting them from using anything they can to maintain the order and safety of all of our students.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. I do have a question. So I just want to make sure that I understand this correctly. When they had spoke to us before, the SROs actually go through a special SRO training. Is that correct? So like
That's correct.
they're trained to do that. When we would have substitutes that would come in, so if one of the current folks that we have, or sorry, officers that we have, if they take a vacation or something, we have a substitute come in, would the substitute also be SRO trained, or is it just somebody appointed by the chief?
So as a part of the agreement, we would always have 3 officers at the school, but there's not a guarantee that every one of those 3 would have gone through the SRO training. The SRO training is intense. It does involve leave from duty to go through the several weeks of training. So we would have 3 officers, but if one of the officers is a sub officer, there's not a guarantee that they would have completed the SRO training.
Okay.
And my concern is still futuristically. I've done my research by speaking with some prior students regarding the use of the prone restraint from either the current SROs or the 2 that was there, that's no longer there, Mr. Berry, and the other gentleman that just left office, I'm sorry, what's his name? He just moved on recently.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Officer Lou.
Yes.
Officer Lou.
And the students I spoke with spoke very highly of those individuals as well as the officer that's currently there. So my confidence in those individuals, I feel comfortable with the restraint, the prone restraint. But I'm still concerned with, just because they're trained properly does not necessarily guarantee they're going to do their job properly, as well as we see in our current culture. So I'm still kind of on the fence with it. I mean, I like the current, where we are with the current SROs, but I'm still kind of trying to understand what's in place if we see this get out of hand or used on a more regular basis in the future. What do we have in place to be able to pull it, that particular language out if we see it, the SROs move on and we get new SROs?
To answer that question, so the expectation would be that this be an annual agreement that is readopted on a yearly basis. That was my conversation with the chief. The agreement that we're operating on now was agreed to in 2014. So best practice is to readopt on a yearly basis. And so my assumption is that language could be changed, every year as it's readopted.
Okay.
And we could, am I assuming that should something happen, that we could even change it in the middle of the year if we had to? I mean, if we wanted to, right? I mean, it's not like it has to be good for one whole year. if we want to change it before then.
Yeah, part of the agreement also, Ruth, is that we would hold a minimum once a semester meeting of my team and then the chief's command staff. Just so what we see now, we come together and problem solve when we need to problem solve, but best practice would be to come together regularly, whether things are going very well or whether there are issues. So we'd be coming together at least once a semester. And I've not talked about that with the chief about modifying it before the end of the year, but it would be an agreement that has to be signed off by both Ritenour and St. Anne. And so by mutual agreement, I'm sure that we could change it before the end of the year.
Okay, all right. Well, if we have those in place, then I'm for keeping it in if we have that in place. Because as I said
or having
before,
it removed?
keeping it in if we're going to be able to review it, annually or as needed if we see it being abused or, anything like that.
I think a document like this, we could review that every time there's a situation up there that comes to our attention.
Right.
And I'm sorry to cut you off, Kayla. As was discussed too, the record keeping was an opportunity. That was a discussion I had with my team around the record keeping around restraints. That can be ongoing conversations with the board as well. And just for clarity purposes, agreement number 2, where the language is not in the agreement, that means that it's not prohibited. Number 1, the language prohibits a prone restraint. Sorry, Kayla.
No worries. I was just going to say, I feel like, so we discussed this with the Game Changers and their social justice group at Ritenour, and they and I are all in favor of the first agreement, just because, we're discussing how we could always review the agreement, but the only way that we would know that it needs reviewing is if it's too late and if something has already happened to one of our students. So I just wanted to say that because it's important that students know that we don't want anything to have to be adjusted. But yeah, at our meeting, our students, they said they're very comfortable with the officers, but given the situation, they're not comfortable with a prone restraint just because it's ended lives. And I agree, I don't want my officers to be, have their hands tied, but we've had a lot more arrests, a lot more fights than we have had of deadly situations that would actually require this. So that's just what I think, but yeah.
Kayla, thank you so much for that. I really wanted to kind of hear your perspective because I'm also very much, it's a very important decision because in all honesty, I know how important it is to have the SROs and to know that we're creating a safe environment for our kids when they go back to the regular classrooms. I think it's also kind of important to note that it's not just so much worrying about students, it's also worrying about intruders coming into the building. That's also a part of that because that's happened worldwide. So that's always a concern. But then I also have to consider thinking, okay, we've had policies like this in the past and there have been, not our SROs, because I tremendously respect our SROs that we have in our building as well as our police departments within our area. But there have been missteps by individuals within the country with this policy. And so when we're looking at it, it's almost like looking towards the future. What can we do better? Are there other ways of doing things? Making sure that we have bias training, because it's not like they're coming into a penitentiary. They're coming into a school with our children, which is a completely different environment. And so I would like to think that our buildings are safe already. And so that's something that I'm also always considering. Because once you've had an incident like that, you have to not only consider if that does happen, it's also happening in front of our children and what are we teaching and telling our own students too. And so it's really tough, but for me, it's like really looking towards the future and what can we do to improve this that also is still ensuring the safety of our staff, our students, and everybody within the building. So Kayla, thank you so much for saying that. And also Orlando, you too. I'm still listening to everybody. So if anybody else has anything to say, I still my ears are pitched open to listen to everything.
So I will just say, I just want to make sure that everybody is clear on each of the items because it is very confusing. So, and it's one word, so it's confusing. So SRO agreement number 1 has to prohibit prone restraint. SRO agreement number 2 takes out prone restraint as a being prohibited.
Allows it.
Allows prone there. Thank you. Allows prone restraint. And based on what was shared with from Dr. Kilbride is that this is something that we'll be reviewing at least once a year and readopting with the St. Anne Police Department and the SROs. Any other statements or questions?
Correct me or refresh my memory. Hasn't it only been used once since 14? Was that the report the last time we spoke?
That prone restraint was once?
Was it used only? Yeah, I thought they said it was only used once since 2014. Am I correct about that?
No, there were two reports of incidents from last year.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, along Stacy's line of thinking and stating, you know, if we do have a stranger come in and they can't do the prone restraint, that might be deadly if it's somebody with on a mission. So
I will say my concern has been if we have somebody come in that is there to harm our other students or staff, that is my concern about not having it, because the split second that it would take for them to refer back to, okay, I'm not allowed to do it, but this is a situation that I need to, that could be a split second like that can actually take a life. So that's what I'm concerned about.
Is there any way that we could include in the document that the only time this is allowed to be used in the event that someone has a deadly weapon?
I don't think so, because that's too specific. And how do you know if they have a deadly weapon until they pull it out? You know, I that you like Jennifer's saying, they have to think, oh wait, do they? Oh wait, can I or can't I? What do I do? No, I don't think.
And I will say one of the things that made me feel more comfortable is when Officer Miller had done the presentation where he showed that there's actually 3 before that would even be used. Right. It's not like they would be walking down the hall and that's the first thing that they do to a student. That there were 3 steps that they go through before they even come to that. Right. So to me, if it's coming to that, it makes me think, is there something seriously harmful to other people? That is my biggest concern, is the harm to the other people, everybody else, you know. So
that is something we talked about, was just that it's very subjective when this is allowed. Yeah, just because we don't have like something specifically saying. So if an officer did decide, like one of our new officers decided, oh, I think this person's dangerous just because I'm afraid of them. You know, I know that's not crazy likely, but I just think that it would be a statement to our students that, given that so many of them have said that they just aren't comfortable with this, if there was any way we can make it more specific about when this is allowed, or you know, repercussions we could take, like, you know, in the event that this is used in a situation that's unnecessary. Our students, they just want to know that they have options, you know, in the event that this does become an issue.
Becomes an issue, we're going to talk about it. Isn't that what we just talked about?
Right.
That Chris, we're going to talk about it if it becomes an issue, and we all have the ability to change it if needed.
Right. I mean, I think it's great we're going to talk about it, but I think we've already identified historically we have an opportunity for record keeping. So that's going to have to be a part of the process moving forward, because if we're not actively aware of what's occurring, then we're not going to know to even talk about it.
Exactly.
So I think that's going to have to be something that we take into consideration in regards to this. It's not just one or two, but it's also including and holding people accountable if that record keeping is not occurring, because I know there's some opportunity surrounding that. The other piece that I think we have to be mindful of is this is not just this one agreement that we are setting this precedent for. This will be agreements moving forward from now on across the district in all of our policies as it pertains to restraints, not just for this one organization who we have a great relationship with. So I just want to put that out there, that this will be the precedent moving forward for all agreements as it pertains to restraints.
Well, who else would be doing the restraining besides the police, though?
So we have, we have staff members that are trained in restraint. We have administrators that are trained in restraint. So, a number of staff, the goal is to avoid restraint, physical restraint, if at all possible, and engage in de-escalation first. But we do have a number of staff members that are trained in CPI.
So, and that prone restraints, or are you referring to that particular restraint?
No, CPI does not include that. So it's not something that is recommended through CPI, the prone restraint.
But the prone restraints are only given if necessary by the SROs. Is that what we're saying?
Right. It's not a recommended practice through CPI. It's not an approved restraint practice through the training that our staff members receive.
Oh boy.
So, board members, I can see that there's still, a good bit of angst here. We're operating under the current agreement. If a board member is not comfortable making a recommendation at this point, this has been an ongoing issue at work session. If a board member is not comfortable making a recommendation at this point, we could table this item, answer questions that you may have around record keeping and so on, and get to a point where a board member is comfortable making a recommendation if you're not comfortable doing it tonight.
I'd make a motion that we approve document number 2.
Second.
Before I take the vote, is there anybody that feels uncomfortable, like they still have questions and would like to table the?
I don't think we could do that now.
Oh.
So when a motion has been called and
Yep,
seconded,
I'm sorry.
there's still another time. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, but we can talk about it before
Right.
you can
Yes.
talk about it.
Does anybody?
I'm just a little concerned that we're following something that's, is this no change at all from the one that's already in place? If we do number 2, is it no change?
So from the existing agreement, there are a number of changes in the agreement. One of the changes includes anti-bias training that would be provided to Ritenour staff as well as the SROs, and it would be made available to the entire. So yeah, there's a number of changes in the agreement.
Yes, right. So my concern is I would rather move on with this and get the new stuff that we really know we want to help improve things, such as the training you just mentioned, instead of having to rely on something that's 6 years old, and knowing that we can go ahead and look to we can we can, if we approve this, we can request that, you know, the documentation and stuff continues or improves, you know, whatever our concerns are, and the semester meetings or whatever you were talking about earlier. I feel more comfortable moving forward than staying back at what we had before.
But isn't both 1 and 2 providing that same training, with the difference just being the prone restraints?
Yes.
So regardless to whether we approve the prone restraints or not, the other pieces will still be a part of the new agreement.
Correct. But if we table it or it doesn't pass, then we're going to still be operating under the other one.
Okay, so we need to pass one or two.
Right, that we don't have the training and all that we want to do to move forward is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I feel like that training is absolutely one of the most important pieces between both of them.
Right.
Right.
Dr. Kilbright, if we move forward with the vote and it passes for number 2, can we ask for a just kind of an update 3 months after we get back into the buildings? I mean, obviously, there's nobody in the buildings right now. So if we could just kind of get an update on the documentation as Lisa was asking for.
You know, I think a way to do that would be an update to the board on each of the semester meetings, because if the board approves this, as was said, this would be the model for the other agreements. And so it wouldn't just be the St. Anne Police Department, it would be St. John and Breckenridge Hills as well. So I'm just envisioning an update at a work session on the outcomes of those meetings.
Okay.
I think that'd be great. Every semester get an update on it.
Yeah.
And that would, I'm sorry, Stacy, go ahead.
For me, it's also what alternatives can we put in place aside from the prone position so that we can look like we're moving towards a better change instead of still having that. I'm still very uncomfortable with that. I think that there are many other opportunities to be able to restrain an individual. And so I'm still looking towards the future, towards not just now, I'm thinking 10, 20 years from now too.
I just want to remind you guys that there is a 3-step process that Officer Miller went through and said that comes before that is actually used. So if we could get that every semester, just kind of have an update. And when you do that, can we include outside of just the SROs? So any reports, you said that are, we have staff members that are trained on that too. So would that be included in the report also?
No, so we have staff members that are trained on a yearly basis on an ongoing rolling basis around CPI. I was envisioning that this would be, you know, an update on if the board approves all of the SRO agreements. You know, we will have the meeting with each of the police departments once a semester, and I was envisioning that being a meeting of the results from the meeting, if there are any restraints that were involved. You know, restraints don't just have to be prone restraints. They're, as Officer Miller had shared, and there needs to be documentation from that when law enforcement does a restraint or when any staff member does a restraint. So, you know, that could be provided as well. Is that your question, Jennifer? So when we would be reporting out, that we would be sharing the restraint documentation, not only by SROs, but by Ritenour staff. Is that what your question is?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we do track that. There is a process that buildings document, and we could make that happen.
Okay.
But would the prone restraints be reported when it happened? And I'm not speaking of at that moment, but if there's an incident where the prone restraint has to be used, we're not going to wait a semester before the board finds that out, correct?
So if that's the expectation of the board, if there would be a prone restraint used, that we not wait a semester, but the board would be notified immediately that was done. That's what I hear you saying, Orlando.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
We could do that. And that would have to be a conversation, you know, be clear with the SROs to be clear with the department that if ever that would be used, we would need to know immediately. It would have to be documented, and then we would share that with the board.
Okay. I think that would be better.
So to be clear then, a meeting with the board once a semester, the results of the SRO agreements, the meetings with the police departments, as well as data on restraints district-wide. And then if ever a prone restraint was used, the documentation and the notification to the board would happen immediately.
Yes.
Okay.
I like that one.
Yeah. Okay.
Call the vote.
So, yes, I'm calling a vote. Unless there's anything else. All right. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Garden? Oh, I
Yes.
skipped over. Sorry. Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Sorry about that. You moved. Dr. Robin?
Pass for right now.
Miss Greco?
Yes.
Miss Glover Jones?
No.
Dr. Albin?
I'm gonna have to vote no on this one, guys.
And I'll vote yes. All right.
I did not hear Penny's vote on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to 3.02, we have our personnel recommendations.
Good evening, board members. I'm here to recommend numbers 1 through 18, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
I have a question about number 15.
I'm sorry, Ruth, did you say 15?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What's your question?
Reason.
Oh.
Actually, stress related to the pandemic was cited.
Okay.
And the desire to reduce the amount of responsibilities during the pandemic, trying to balance family needs and work needs and those things.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? If there's no other questions, I'll look for a motion.
Approve 1 through 18 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I will call the vote. Dr. Thomas? Dr. Thomas? You're muted.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Garden?
Yes.
Dr. Albin?
Yes.
Miss Greco?
Yes.
Miss Glover Jones?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Moving on to 3.03. Thank you, Dr. LaChance. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. Moving on to 3.03, we have our board member comments. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share?
You know, the one person, Jim Marshall, class of 76, he ran cross country for Ritenour, and he ran track as well. He was one of the 7 on our state cross country team that won the championship when he was a senior, I believe. And he went to state for track several times. The team that he was on helped him move into his college days where he got a scholarship. And he has been a coach, and he is still an active coach, even in his retirement at district level, at high school levels, and at the college level. He is sought out for his expertise in training people one-on-one. So I've known Jim since we were both in high school, and he's had a remarkable career, and it's great that we get to honor him for what he's done for our high school and college youth. He has worked with both the guys track team and the girls track teams, cross country teams, and he's had success in both areas. The second thing I think Ms. Conley said today, which I'm very, very happy to hear, because this is a chance to move education forward with the virtual learning and change the way we do things. And I'm glad they looked at it that way, and I'm glad we're moving in that way, in that regard. COVID-19 pandemic is something that we're going to remember for the rest of our lives. But I think at the same time, we could look at it as a turning point in how we delivered education to our neighbors' kids and to the kids up the street and down the block. And I applaud all of our staff and faculty and managers, everybody that has stepped up and helped change the course of this ship in education.
I'd just like to bring up that I'd like to know from Chris where we are with the plan to go to phase 2, because we all are getting a lot of emails, phone calls. I understand. I think that there is a meeting on Monday with the committee, and I got a phone call tonight about Pattonville has announced that they're going to start their, I think it's virtual. I mean, their hybrid, our total go back for kindergarten through 2nd grade or something on the 21st. So I just know there's a lot of people that tune into our meetings and who contact us and want to know where we are. So Chris, could you please give us an update?
Yeah, we've got our phase 2 committee. The first meeting is 3:45 on Monday. The committee is made up of 25 persons, made up of teachers, administrators, support staff, and parents. A number of the parents that have contacted either board members or me directly are the parent representatives that are on that committee. On Monday, I'll be sharing the regional data from the St. Louis County Department of Health. I'll also be sharing data from Harvard and Johns Hopkins University to paint the picture of the spread, the positivity rates, and the transmission rates at different age ranges. So the 5 to 9 age range, the 10 to 14 age range, and the 15 to 19 age range, because what the data shows right now is that the positivity rate at the 15 to 19 age range is much higher than what it is at the 5 to 9 age range. So want to work through the transition to phase 2 with that committee. We don't have a definite date set, but want to work with that committee to talk through a return to phase 2. Look forward to reporting out to the board the results of that first meeting on Monday. The second meeting of that group would be the following Monday, the 21st at 3:45 as well.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Sure.
I just wanted to echo what Jennifer and Brad have shared tonight, as well as other people, just appreciating the efforts that our staff and our administrators and teachers are putting forth in regards to the virtual learning. It's a learning experience in and of itself. And I know it's a lot of hard work. And just being a parent also in the district, I have to be honest, I have appreciated the amount of communication. I know sometimes we're like, oh my God, don't send me another email. But honestly, I have appreciated the communication that's been coming, the intentional communication that's been coming from staff reaching out to say, hey, just let me know if you need help. and they've been intentional about emailing or including parents on the email, students. So I really appreciate those efforts. And I think that's also helping with creating relationships with the students and the families. I know that there are some challenges, but I think for this being the first time of us doing this, I appreciate the efforts and I see people diligently trying. And thank you so much for that.
Yes, I would agree with that. I did on the first couple of days, sat in on just a few minutes of each of the, classes, and just to kind of get an idea of how things are going, and then left her on her own. I just kind of wanted to see what was happening, and the teachers that I saw giving their little talks about, okay, well, this is my family, and this is this, telling just about themselves, how long they've been teaching, and some things that you're going to be doing this year, and also the emails are coming consistently whenever something is needed, and I get the emails about things that are going on in the class, and if there's anything that needs to be picked up or needs to be purchased or whatever. They're very good, and I do applaud these teachers for all the work that they have done in getting this together. I think they've just all done such a good job. And as far as teachers being prepared and giving their full effort, I have not heard any derogatory comments towards that. Some people are distressed about their children and what's going on with them, and especially maybe young ages, but nobody is complaining that the teachers aren't prepared and that they aren't trying. And so I think it's all good.
Good. Good.
In echo to all of that, I'd just like to also state, I try to find the way to tell everybody, if you need help, you have to ask. No matter if you're a teacher or you're an administrator or you're a parent or you're a student, you have to ask, and it's okay to ask for help. We don't want people struggling. And so I just want to make sure to state that is that we can't help you if we don't know that you need help with something, whether it be logging in and, get in touch with the tech people or get in touch with the school. So just, parents, teachers, grandparents that are helping out, siblings that are helping out, just if you need help, please ask.
Try to be a little patient if you have to wait a little while to hear from somebody. It's it's better. I know it's a lot better, but you're not going to get an answer like in 10 minutes, most likely, but it will come.
Yeah. And
that's real world everywhere. It's like that, not just in school.
Right. You're right.
Yeah. So thank you all for sharing and everything. I promise we will get through this all together. And we do want to get our students into the best learning environment for them. And I'm stressing that.
Exactly.
Because I have found a lot of families have said this virtual is better for us than the classroom. So we will get everybody back to where they will succeed the best.
Jennifer, I was thinking, a lot of times the virtual learning isn't necessarily the problem. The problem is the process, and sometimes people are uncomfortable with the process.
Yeah.
Once you learn the process, then everything else kind of falls into place. And that's the same way with anything you do that's different than what you're used to doing. So I just encourage everyone that's kind of frustrated, just trust the process and work through it, and eventually it will become second nature. I know it might not seem like it right now, but I think about my own personal challenges that I've had with switching different things and how frustrated I was. But now that I have it, it's the best thing that I've ever had. So just trust the process and You'll get through it. Just be encouraged.
And the last thing I'll say is we care about every student in this school district and even beyond, the ones coming up, the ones that have left. So we care about them immensely, and we care about our teachers and all of our staff. And so these decisions are very difficult on us, and we are trying to make sure that we take the right steps to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to quit talking because you all know I'm going to start crying. Okay, if there's nothing else that anybody would like to share, I'll go ahead and move on to our consent agenda items.
I'd like to move to approve consent agenda items 4.01 through 4.09 as recommended.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any questions about anything? Okay, I'll take the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Garden?
Yes.
Dr. Albin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Ms. Glover-Jones?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Thank you all very much. Moving on to 5.01. I'm looking for a motion to move to closed session.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I'll call the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Garden?
Yes.
Dr. Albin?
Yes.
Ms. Greco?
Yes.
Ms. Glover-Jones?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Thank you all very much for this evening.